Welcome to the True North Fantasy Football Podcast.
What up, fantasy people? Trav here from True North Fantasy Football. I am, as always, posted up in Dirty Laundry Studios. Welcome back to the True North Fantasy Pod. We are, of course, brought to you by Monkey Knife Fight, where you can get an instant match on your first deposit of up to 50 bones by using our promo code TNFF. So we appreciate everybody who's signed up for Monkey Knife Fight with the promo code already. Again, like that helps us more than any of you know, so we really appreciate that. And again, that promo code's TNFF. So check out Monkey Knife Fight for the best player prop games in the business and get to making some cheddar. Now that I've got the business out of the way, it is time for some more business, actually. Ty, I guess we're going to call this business. Hey, Ty. I got with me, as always, the True North Research Demon himself. Yeah. Tyrell McLaughlin is here with me. What up, Ty?
Same old. Hockey season starting too.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun to watch some of that puck for sure. And joining us tonight, Ty, a special guest who we are very pumped to introduce. I was lucky enough to play in a league with this man, Bob Lung's Kings Classic. He is the host of the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast, easily one of the best follows on Twitter, and that is Ian Hartitz. If you're living under a rock, you can go find him on Twitter at iHartitz, but you should be following him already. Ian, we really appreciate you dropping down from the chopper to join us tonight. How you doing?
Yeah, the Choppers haven't been doing so well this year, but I am doing good, guys. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, we got Columbus Blue Jackets taking on the Predators tomorrow. I'm pumped for the Hawk to be back, but I know we're going to stick to mostly football on this podcast, so I won't bore you with my CBJ takes because, I don't have too many of them. So
Ty's definitely more in tune with the hockey
wins in
than
the
I am.
playoffs for your Blue. Yeah, and I'm just absolutely honored to have Ian here. Aside from being a dog owner, which is just an easy sell, a proud dog owner is an easy sell for me. But yeah, just one of the most entertaining guys in the business, I think, and one of the hardest working. It's been cool to kind of watch your ascent through the industry because it's not supernatural. It's because you put out things like those reports every week during the season, whether it's advanced charts from offenses versus opposing defenses, the mismatch manifesto, all the podcasts. It's all really unmatched resources for fantasy owners. But I was wondering, Ian, we were talking a bit before we got on air here. Do you find that this pocket of the offseason, do you find you dial it back a little bit? Or is this kind of a weird time of the year because you do have the offseason swell starting to come to shore, but you still have fantasy playoffs, DFS in full swing? Is it kind of a balancing act for you, or do you just need a break at this time?
I definitely lightened things up. I mean, we were ripping off 5 episodes of the PFF Fantasy Pod for a week, another 5 articles. I dialed it back to 2 podcasts, 4 articles. So, we're still grinding, but it's not quite the same regular season thing. I just think it's important to continue to write and, podcast pretty much, every single week, multiple times, every day if you can. I mean, that's how you get better. That's how I've gotten better. And, the second you kind of leave people, you leave your listeners, you leave your readers hanging, they go find someone else. There's always an appetite for football out there. And I remember, before I started writing and kind of, just doing my own thing, one of the things that I, as a viewer and just reader, I really appreciated from some of my favorite writers was them being, more active or, just writing more often, even if, not every piece is going to be, an awesome feature, just, killing it. Robert Mays had that fantastic article with the Athletic talking about Brandon Staley and the Rams, for example. Not always going to be able to top that, but I think, the best way to get to that point, do it as often as possible. So, yeah, man, so a little bit less in regular season for sure, but it's just every single week more and more stuff comes to mind to try to go to. So it's something I'm trying to dial back a little bit, but at the same time, I don't want anyone catching up.
Yeah, that's and we are super thankful that we get to kick off our off season with you joining us, Ian. We're going to be keeping it rolling weekly on the True North Fantasy Pod, and we've got 4 other weekly shows on the TNFF network on YouTube. So please make sure you go like and subscribe to the channel. We love seeing those numbers grow. We love people getting eyes on our stuff, and feel free to leave a comment because we love to hear what people think of our stuff, most importantly. So Ty, you actually mentioned Ian's mismatch manifesto. The divisional round version of that piece dropped today, Ian. Some killer data in those. If anybody wants to get a good edge coming into these divisional lineups or divisional round games, definitely check out the mismatch manifesto. So we're going to kick it off with some game picks for these playoff matchups. And we're going to start with the Rams and the Packers. The Rams are going to Lambeau, with the Packers being the 1 seed. Green Bay is a 6.5-point favorite against that killer defense of the Rams. Ian, how do you see this one playing out in Lambeau, the frozen tundra?
I don't know if the Rams can keep up. And I know we got these stats out there. Jared Goff, an under 40-degree temperature and all that. That's being pretty skewed by some of those Jeff Fisher games that we just kind of don't talk about these days anymore. But, this version of the Aaron Rodgers offense, it took me by surprise coming in the year because they didn't really change their personnel. Devin Funchess was the only guy of, really anything meaningful they added to the pass catching room. They had the same coaching staff and the same Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers has always been awesome, but truly look at any stat you want. There's a stark difference between 2010 and 2014 Aaron Rodgers and 2015, 2019. Well, 2020, he's now been the best version of him we've ever seen. PFF passing grade, touchdowns, completion rate, QB rating, career highs in every single mark. And, he's getting back to being pretty much one of the best quarterbacks we've ever seen play this game, particularly in recent memory. One of the cool stats we have with PFF is EPA per play, one of the best efficiency metrics you can find. And literally 3 of the league's top 5 most efficient passing games since 2010 have been Aaron Rodgers, 2011, 2014, and now 2020. So Rams defense, Aaron Donald, all those guys, they are truly fantastic. I think it's very smart the way they play their numbers. They're just trying to limit big plays and try to, encourage teams to run the ball, things that you should be doing in the year 2021. But I just think right now in the NFL, great offense beats great defense. Aaron Rodgers is coming up. Anyone's idea of a great offense, give me the Packers minus 6.5.
Ty, where are you sitting on that one?
Yeah, I think I'll take the Packers too. I think, if they can get out to an early lead, it's kind of curtains for sure. Like Ian's getting at, it's going to be really hard for the Rams to keep pace. And it really is just a classic offense versus defense. It is the number 1 highest scoring offense versus the team allowing the fewest points against all season. And the Rams are no joke. It is a pretty great defense, right? They're allowing the fewest passing yards, air yards, touchdowns, you name it. And efficiency wise, the fewest yards per play. They also force teams to play extremely slow. So really tough matchup, but like we're saying, Green Bay can definitely transcend that because they've been a pretty spectacular offense, having a pretty sensational season. So on the other side of that, I think the Rams aren't dead in the water. If they can run the ball against this Packers run funnel defense, I think because there's a weird time of possession complex in this game where these are the number 1 and number 2 teams this season in terms of time of possession. So I think obviously it's going to be really hard for the Rams to come back, but if they're the team who can actually build a 10-point lead or something early, we have the game on our hands. I think it's going to come down to one of those X factors, how does Aaron Donald look, who's obviously banged up, because if Aaron Rodgers gets comfy, the Rams coach can be great. It can be it's that age of coach versus pass rush debate. But yeah, I think I'll take Green Bay, and I'm kind of just tempering expectations for most of the players in terms of fantasy production. But yeah, I definitely think Green Bay is safe in this one.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Green Bay with the 6.5 point as a 6.5 point favorite as well, especially with Goff and him being the thumbless wonder as well and not looking very good when he was throwing the ball last week against the Seahawks. So I think they're going to need to rely on that defense if they have a shot, and I think the Packers are going to win by at least a touchdown. So Ian, we're going to move into the next matchup of the weekend, the second Saturday matchup with the Ravens going to Buffalo. Really hope there's people getting crushed through tables there because it is fantastic. I was looking, Ian, for those videos after the Bills won last week, and I unfortunately didn't find as many as I hoped to. But I'm really hoping if they can get a win in this divisional round, we see mayhem in Buffalo. I know Josh Allen said that if Buffalo wins the Super Bowl, he's gonna go through a flaming table. I just saw something come out about that, so I am here for that. as far as the matchup goes, the Ravens D did a masterful job against Derrick Henry, and one of our favorites as well as yours, AJ Brown, Ian. But the Bills got past the Colts in a close one. Do you think the Ravens can pull the upset with the Bills being 2.5-point favorites here, Ian? Or do you think the Bills are going to take that one?
I do not. I was wrong. I thought the Titans were going to be able to take down the Ravens, but wrong year for it. And credit to Lamar Jackson Company for getting that dub. I mean, the dude with the ball in his hand, I think we almost take it for granted sometimes just how electric of an athlete Lamar Jackson is. And we it's like we all know he is that good. So because of that, we just, pick apart his passing game. But we're comparing him to passers. I couldn't even dream of doing the things that Lamar can do on the ground. So, it is what it is. He's always going to, get his hatred and people, non-ironically calling him a running back in these highlights. It's like, yeah, he runs like a running back. And guess what? He's a pretty good passer too, because you can't freaking do normal coverages against a guy that can run like that. But, story for another day. Either way, the one concern we do have in this matchup is a Bills offense that, we've seen move the ball up and down the field pretty much all season long. And the Ravens, who great run offense, but, as okay as Lamar is a passer, yes, we do know there's plenty of limitations there. Bills pass defense has been just fine this year. Their run defense has been bad, but I think this is an example that we see all across the league where it's a bad run defense, but it's more or less because the Bills understandably devote more resources to their secondary. I mean, the Bills were a bottom 5 defense in terms of just runs that they faced and having A+ defenders in the box. So they were never loading up the box to try to stop things. There's that game against the Chiefs where Clyde Edwards-Helaire was going nuts and everyone's saying, what are the Bills doing? They're taking the game out of Patrick Mahomes' hands. It didn't work out in the win-loss column, but you can see why they do that. So, even though that might look like a big advantage for the Ravens run game, I think when they face a more one-dimensional offense like Baltimore, we'll see them accordingly add more guys to the box, have a better chance of getting the numbers in their favor to stop them. But, I think it's a good line, but again, I will take Buffalo here. It's hard to find a hole in the Ravens defense, but they blitz a ton, top 5 defense in blitzing, and Josh Allen has been the best quarterback against the blitz all year. And they're interesting to know I found because Zach Moss is going to be out. Maybe we see more 4 wide receiver sets, Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, John Brown, Gabriel Davis, even Isaiah McKenzie, speed everywhere. The Bills have run the second highest rate of 4 wide receiver sets this year behind only the Arizona Cardinals. You look at the Ravens, 21st in yards per attempt versus 4 wide receiver sets, 23rd in explosive pass play rate, 26th in passer rating. So, we'll see if that comes to fruition. It's not going to be more than, a couple handfuls of snaps, but a couple things to keep an eye out for because Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, Jimmy Smith, hard to find a weakness in these guys, but maybe the Bills have just what it takes to get the job done. So give me Buffalo -2.5.
I like it. That's going to be a tight game. That's probably one of the ones that I'm most looking forward to watching this weekend is that Ravens and Bills game. Ty, what are you thinking about that one? The Bills are a 2.5-point favorite.
Yeah, I mean, I could play devil's advocate a little bit for the Ravens. It's kind of like what Ian was alluding to with the defense. Like what Buffalo does well on offense is kind of what Baltimore does well on defense. Like the 3rd most passing yards going against the 6th fewest passing yards allowed in this game. And you just kind of think of how explosive Buffalo's been. Like they've scored 24 or more points in 14 of 17 games this year, but the Ravens have allowed 24 points just 5 times. So, neither offense I think is guaranteed in this game as well. Kind of like I was, I'm thinking about last game. The Bills offense is kind of banged up as well. Like that might be one of the tiebreakers for me. Who I want to trust more. Just because, Cole Beasley, Diggs, they're not at 100%. They lost Zach Moss last week. But, I'd concede that I just don't really have good vibes on this game because I do recognize that Baltimore, they have to score in this game. And we know they aren't built to score very many points. Like they're the number 1 rushing offense in football, but dead last in passing. So I kind of like the Ravens just because they are underdogs, I guess. But yeah, I think they need a really good showing on defense in the first half for sure. And they can't have a slow start on either side of the ball. So little room for error for sure.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to start out by eating a lot of clock and just running it down the Bills' throat and just kind of stamping their dominance in that facet. But I think I'm going to go with the Bills as a 2.5-point favorite as well myself, just because I'm circling the wagons, fellas. Looking at the Browns and the Chiefs, that is the first matchup of the Sunday slate. The Cleveland Browns, Ty, they took down the Steelers in a big spot last week, which was a big moment for the Cleveland Browns franchise. And obviously we got the Chiefs. They're the 1 seed. They've got that video game offense, and they're a 10-point favorite in this game, which is huge. But I mean, that team pretty much warrants it, especially versus the Cleveland Browns. Ian, is there any chance in this one for the dog pound underdogs to get that one?
I think they can maybe cover, but honestly, like, I did our, PFF fantasy football podcast this week, and we were doing our picks, and I wrote down Cleveland. By the end of me and Andrew Erickson's conversation about it, I'd switched to the Chiefs, and now I'm kind of back to Cleveland against the spread. So out of all these picks, I feel the absolute worst about this one. So, great way to, open myself up, I know. But Ben Roethlisberger threw 4 picks last week, had the first snap of the game go, right past him into the end zone for a Browns touchdown. Don't think the Browns are going to get that same benefit of the doubt against the Chiefs. Andy Reid coming off a bye. We all know he's been a freaking god whenever he's had that going for him. But I think more than anything, like, we just now see the chance for Patrick Mahomes and company to play in a game that matters. And I think the whole, them not sucking, but just not being, the same usual juggernaut thing down the stretch, it's been a little bit overblown. They were still in control most of these games, just kind of took their foot off the gas down the stretch. You look at the first 3 quarters of the, just every game throughout the year, Chiefs and the Packers are the only offenses averaging at least 0.2 EPA per play. So they are, no doubt about it, the number 1 team in the AFC, and I'd say the entire NFL. And look, the Browns, it's been a nice run. Maybe they keep it going. Baker, if he, he's been, ever since OBJ went out, going to his first read, he has been the second best quarterback behind only Aaron Rodgers. So we see it happen. Like, it's good when he can just get back there, first read's open, put his foot in the ground, make a play. But at some point, it needs to run out. I mean, this offensive line, first one in PFF's database to finish the year ranked first in run blocking and pass blocking grade. The problem is they're now all kinds of banged up. And so, I think there's too much firepower on the Chiefs side of the ball. Defense, not amazing, but we're not getting a fully functional version of the Browns. So, man, give me Browns plus 10, but I already want to pick the Chiefs again.
Yeah, for sure. Ty, where are you sitting?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. You just don't see spreads like this in the playoffs very often. But I think I still kind of like Kansas City. I mean, all season, what I've been grappling with is how real are the Browns, right? Like, they beat the Steelers, beat the Titans, beat the Colts. Outside of those games, strength schedule is pretty hard to, like, rely on. Kansas City, it felt like the Browns didn't play a ton of meaningful games because a lot of their meaningful games ended up being these windy, weird games. And then they go out, they lose to the Jets, some of their biggest tests. They lost both games against the Ravens this year. Baltimore, by the way, scored 38 and 47 points in those 2 games against this Browns defense, too. By the way, I think that second game between those 2 teams in Week 14 is kind of lifting up this game total in this one because Cleveland put up 42 points in that game. But yeah, I think, Andy Reid off a bye, it just scares the living daylights out of you if you're that defense. And Cleveland is obviously like just built to run the ball, play action. That's all they really got. And the Chiefs, they don't let you play that kind of game, right? Like, nobody can play that game if it's a 3-possession game at halftime. So, yeah, the Browns, 150 rushing yards per game, Chubb being the GOAT, Kareem Hunt, top 10 talent perhaps, but the Chiefs throw for over 300 yards a game, score about 30 points per game, and that'll put a wrench in any team's game plan who wants to run the ball.
Yeah, I'm with you guys on that one. I don't think the firepower is there for the Browns to take the game outright. I do like them to cover that, though, because I think just playoff atmosphere just sometimes make things a little bit tight. And I think maybe the defensive line for the Browns might be able to get after Patrick Mahomes a little bit. But yeah, same as Ian there with the Browns covering, but the Chiefs taking the matchup. So the last one, we've got a divisional game, the only rivalry game on the slate this week, the Bucs at the Saints. The Bucs squeaked past Taylor Heineke's Washington football team last week. He was getting some hype on Twitter, and then like it slowly died out afterwards, and it was quite the roller coaster on Twitter for Taylor Heineke fans. The Saints, on the other hand, took care of business against the Bears. The Bucs are 3-point underdogs going to the Superdome. Ian, how do you think this division rivalry is going to shake out, especially with those graybeards at quarterback?
Yeah, I'm not sure if the third time is going to be the charm for Tom Brady and company. And I think I have bet on the Buccaneers in each of the first 2 games against the Saints. But, the more I look at it, I'm just more confident in the Saints' ability to consistently move the ball because, why have we seen Drew Brees and company like have these playoff failures? It's come when defenses really crowd the line of scrimmage. Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, those routes become a lot harder to get, in a playoff atmosphere, not against some of these softer regular season defenses. But in that second Buccaneers game, Brees actually went 8 for 8 when not throwing to his first read, season high PFF grade on those passes. So to me, that's been the issue when you can, crowd Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara. Who else does he get the ball to? Now we got Deontay Harris, Emmanuel Sanders, Jared Cook, Adam Trautman. Not superstars necessarily, but people Breeze is comfortable enough at this point to make some plays with. So I feel good about the Saints offense because this Buccaneers defense, I mean, you guys said it. They've been a shell of themselves of what we thought they could be after the first month or so of the season. I mean, this was kind of the first offense that exposed them with 38 points in week 9. Then since then, we've seen the Rams, Chiefs, Falcons twice. I'll go for at least 27. So, Brady, this offense has come around, and we should give them a little bit benefit of the doubt because, they played the Saints in the first game of the season and then their first game with Antonio Brown down the stretch. So obviously not great, not great matchups to really have a consistent flow on offense. But you also look at those games. Brady had 4 turnover-worthy plays against the Saints, just 6 against everyone else, 2 for 9 on those deep balls. Hey, Brady's been better against everyone else, but I don't know how confident we can be that he's going to be better against a defense that has brought out these problems in the first place. So I have more confidence in Breeze in the Saints offense. I think the Saints defense is better. Give me the Saints -3.
Ty, how about yourself?
Yeah, and 5 of Brady's 12 interceptions this season have come in those 2 games against the Saints. So totally agree. By the way, Breeze really runs that structured offense, loves to spread it around, and 6 touchdown passes, no picks in those 2 games. Really quickly, I just want to mention no one player exceeded 80 yards receiving for either team in either of those matchups, too. So I definitely kind of like the under in this, even though we're looking at 2 of the top 5 highest scoring teams from this regular season. I don't know. I'm just kind of with Ian. Like, I'm sketched out about Brady, but I really don't want to attach to this game at all for DFS whatsoever. Like, Breeze is just kind of impossible to trust at this stage of his career. So essentially, I'm just left with looking at the Saints' run game. And again, they obviously faced the number 1 run defense for Tampa Bay. And no Saints player had 55 yards rushing in either game versus Tampa Bay this year. And that's kind of more true when you look at the Buccaneers, though. So it just comes down to, I think, if I would have any faith in any facet of anybody's game in this matchup, it would be the Saints' run game. Because obviously the Saints are a really mean rushing defense, too, really mean passing defense. Eagles game notwithstanding, Trav. But, for me, it just comes down to if the Saints defense is on, the Saints with Sean Payton having that extra week of rest, extra week of prep in the comfort of their own dome. It's just, it's hard to bet against the Saints when you don't have a lot of faith in either team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely deserve that little Eagles jab there, Ty. So thank you for getting that in. I appreciate that. Every episode, you got to get one in. It's great. Yeah, give me
maybe 2.
Let me take the Bucks to take it. I'll just go a little contrary there and take the Bucks to get it. No crazy reason. I just got a little bit of a hunch there, I guess. So we're going to move into the next segment of the episode here. And Ian, we're going to dive into an article that you wrote as the season wound down, and that would be the 2020 Fantasy Awards that you did over on PFF. I really think that there's some cool storylines that can be pulled from the players that you wrote about. We'll definitely make sure we link that article in the description for anybody listening as well, because it is solid. And we just encourage anybody who wants to get an edge and win at fantasy to go check out Ian's written work over on the PFF site, because it's all stellar. And for 2020, Ian, your rookie of the year, showing solid restraint when it comes to James Robinson and Justin Jefferson. But I think you made the right move based on positional importance. You went for Justin Herbert as your rookie of the year for fantasy football. So obviously he's on the Chargers. They lost a bunch of close games this year and suffered from, to put it nicely, I guess, some suspect coaching. Justin Herbert himself looks really, really good. We loved everything we saw from him. He's got solid weapons with Eckler, Keenan Allen looking fantastic, Mike Williams fitting a certain role, and even Jalen Guyton and Tyron Johnson coming up big in certain spots. What do you think, Ian, of the Chargers offense as a whole in terms of maybe their shortcomings or what you think that they should improve upon?
It'll be interesting to see who ends up taking over that offense. I mean, if Brian Dable ends up leaving Buffalo to come over to LA, look out, everybody. Because, this year Justin Herbert just had truly was spectacular just based on what we've seen from past performances from rookie QBs. Because that was the thing. Like, Justin Jefferson was amazing. We've still seen, I think it was like 6 or 7, or I think he maybe had the 9th highest scoring rookie season ever in terms of just total PPR points. And then James Robinson was like outside the top 20. We've seen, a lot of rookie running backs do great. Could have given Robinson some extra credit for, coming out out of nowhere and just being this undrafted gem. But the big thing for Justin Herbert, look, him, Deshaun Watson, Robert RG3, and Cam Newton, only rookie QBs ever to score at least 20 fantasy points per game. So I know today's NFL is inflating the production a little bit, but this guy did everything he could ask for. And you guys said it. He's got a great group of skill position players around him. Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, I think that's one of the best 1-2 punches in the league. Should certainly be in the top 5, if not top 3. And then, Hunter Henry, Jalen Guyton, Tyron Johnson, Austin Eckler, who always seems to get left out of this. Like, I understand, the offense is not better off just ducking it all game long to Austin Eckler. You got these great downfield threats, but we already saw Herbert start to break out of that mold towards the end of the season. So I know there are these kind of anti-Austin Eckler splits, which we did see come to fruition. He was checking the ball down far more with Austin Eckler than without, and that was hurting the overall offense. But again, already saw signs of him breaking away from that, and I'm sure year 2 and beyond, they'll find a more meaningful way to work together, because they had no practice together without training camp, with Herbert not starting until week 2, and then Eckler pretty much getting hurt immediately afterwards. So everything's lining up from the skill position avenue. Ideally, we get a good coach and then just add more pieces to the offensive line, because that's the one kind of concern with Justin Herbert, because he was so unbelievably good under pressure this year. He's number 1 pretty much every metric you want to look at from PFF, and we do see pressure metrics like that be fairly unstable from year to year. So wouldn't it be shocking if he regresses a little bit in terms of that? But I think with the talent around him, and hopefully with a natural second-year progression. This guy's only 21, maybe just turned 22 still. He's a youngin, and again, hopefully better coaching staff moving forward. I think the arrow is screaming up. He's going to be among the top 8, worst case top 10 quarterbacks picks next year, and it might be higher.
For sure, man. For sure. I like what you said there about the offensive line, because I was digging into a little bit of PFF as well, and they were a bottom 3 pass blocking grade, and they were dead last as a run blocking unit, and none of their starters graded out well as pass blockers or run blockers. So they need some wholesale changes there if they're going to protect that franchise quarterback. But I think if they use his mobility a little bit more too, he could maybe mask a little bit of that, and that's what I'm pretty excited for out of the Chargers offense going into the future. Brian Dable's a great call as well. Ty and I were talking earlier today about that Chargers job, and his specific name that he put out there was Brian Dable, just for the work that he did with Josh Allen, who has some similar skills to what Justin Herbert's got. So I like all of that, my man.
Yeah, real quick. I think that's a great comp with Josh Allen. They're different players, but what both those guys do so well is that they force defenses, for better and for worse, to guard every square inch of the field. They're both athletic guys, even though, in college we didn't necessarily see them rack up rushing yards. They can break the pocket, and if you're just not going to respect that part of their game, they will go pick up rushing yards. They got the freaking arm strength to put the ball anywhere, and that's why, even in the 2018, 2019 editions of that Bills offense, when Josh Allen, was just as likely to throw a 70-yard rope on the dime as he was to target his fullback double covered, on the other side of the field. They were still a good offense just because of that sort of pressure that having this quarterback that's willing to do pretty much anything kind of puts on you. So yeah, I love that comp. Different players, but kind of the way they can affect the game, very similar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Justin Herbert's got a gun. I was really impressed with the touch that he was putting on the ball, because when I was watching his college stuff, it looked like everything was just on a line, even deep balls and stuff. So I was really impressed when he put a little bit of air under it, for sure. So moving into your most valuable fantasy player, this one, I loved it. It was Davante Adams. And for those who are keeping the Davante spelling score at home, that's Davante for Davante Adams. And he edged out Travis Kelce for the honor you had in the article there. And I think it was very well deserved on Davante Adams' part. His 18 touchdowns and 1,300 plus yards, that is just next level. 18 touchdowns in general, just it's shocking to see that number. I'm wondering, Ian, looking at the Packers offseason, there was talk last year about them adding a wide receiver. Obviously, all they did was add Devin Funchess, which was great for Davante Adams, and then he opted out, so it was back at square one for them. I'm wondering if you may have any concern for Adams' production if the Packers were to bring in somebody significant, say they brought in a Corey Davis or a Will Fuller, someone of that ilk. Do you think that's going to have any real impact on Davante Adams and that 30% target share, or is it kind of the situation where 30% is his, and then, the rest of the peasants can fight for the rest.
Get my guy Curtis Samuel there too, maybe. I was pushing so hard for Robbie Anderson to go to Green Bay last year. I feel like that's been the spot. Last season, same thing this offseason, maybe in the offseason before. It's like every just, great wide receiver 2 that we can find, like put them in Green Bay and watch good things happen. But I don't really think it would hurt Davante at this point because, okay, would it maybe take him from, the 180 plus target projection to something closer to 150, 160? Yeah, but we're still talking about anyone's idea of a top 3 receiver if he can get 150 plus targets from Aaron Rodgers with that sort of mind meld that they've been showing. So, Will Fuller specifically, like all we've seen Fuller do is elevate the offenses that he's been with. DeAndre Hopkins, I'm not sure what it is now with 2020 included, but with Will Fuller in the picture, like Hopkins scored more points with Fuller in the lineup versus without, just because he was that much more efficient. The offense was when you have a field stretch like that to open things up. So we see Marquez Valdes-Scantling out there. Like the dude can run by anyone, just like Will Fuller. The problem is he has even worse hands than Will Fuller. So if you give them a legit number 2 field stretching option like a Will Fuller or even like a Curtis Samuel, I mean, I maintain Curtis is just fine as a field stretcher. It's Kyle Allen's fault for not putting that damn thing in his general proximity for an entire season. But, maybe someone like Corey Davis would be a little, more concerning because their route tree would be interfering a little bit more with Davante. But even then, I think we're overthinking it. Like, okay, Davante probably not going to score 26 PPR points per game again next year. That's insane. But, I think he's still going to be good to go over 20. So, I mean, wide receiver is more sticky than even running back in terms of year-to-year production as they, climb up and get older. We see a lot of running backs like really start to go downhill year 4 and beyond. Wide receivers, like it's really fine up until year 7, year 8 and beyond. So Davante Adams, just like the prime example these days of, just a wide receiver not really coming to his own until year 3 or so, still becoming a superstar. I think he's got at least, 2-3 more years playing as arguably the number 1, and if not anyone's idea of a top 3 receiver, regardless of who you want to surround them with.
Yeah, for sure. I think he's pretty safe at that 30+% as well. I don't think this is likely, but especially if Aaron Jones were to walk, he had 15% of the share himself. But even with Aaron Jones in the fold, you've got MVS and Allen Lazard had 28% of the targets. And I think if anybody comes in, like they would probably be taking over that work. And I think that's plenty of work for this acquisition to come in. Ty's boy, Ian, is Aaron Jones. Do you think he is back in Green Bay?
Do I think Aaron Jones is back? It would have to be a pretty team-friendly deal. He's not going to be getting Derrick Henry-esque money. I don't think he's going to be pushing 50+. I don't know, man. It's tough. Like, why'd you draft A.J. Dillon in the 2nd round if you were going to re-sign Aaron Jones? But why'd you draft A.J. Dillon in the 2nd round? The guy balls out in week 16. You give him 5 snaps in week 17. So I don't know, man. The Packers personnel decisions have made 0 sense to me for pretty much like the last half decade. Credit to them. It worked out this year. We were all screaming regression, including myself. They did not. So, obviously they know far more about football than any of us do. So they'll keep doing what they're doing. But gun to my head, I would say Jones is back. I think he'll take a team-friendly-esque deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Ty likes hearing that. It's music to his ears. He's been a truther since Aaron Jones came in, and I can confirm that. And I've loved what I've seen from him. Like Aaron Jones is, Ty always says he's a very disrespected elite running back, and I think that's super true.
He just doesn't have the workload. He scores all the freaking touchdowns, which is awesome. I hate when fantasy analysts like try to take away from touchdowns because yards are more sticky and stable and all this. Football is about scoring points. Tiebreakers need to be about touchdowns. Like we can't just ignore that part of a player's game. So yeah, anytime there's a debate about this player or that player, you got to go touchdowns. We're talking about Stephon Diggs, his placement in the top NFL wide receivers in the PFF fantasy podcast, and I had to go number 3 because Tyreek Hill and Davante Adams are freaking doubling up his touchdowns pretty much. So yeah, man, Aaron Jones, great player. I don't know why he split his entire career with Jamal Williams, who isn't bad, but when you have a great talent like Aaron Jones, let's feature the man.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Hey, Ty.
Amen, brother. Yeah, I think it's wild. Like I just think he's really talented in the receiving game. He's really talented efficiency wise, and he scores touchdowns at a rate almost as high as anybody in the league year after year since he's come into the league. And you can sort it whether you look at fantasy points per touch, whatever. Like he's efficient like an Alvin Kamara, Austin Eckler when it comes to fantasy football points per touch, but he's also kind of doing some of the yards after contact things at a lesser scale than guys like Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb and stuff. But he checks almost every single box in my opinion. I'd almost prefer to see him go elsewhere so he can shut everybody up.
Well, you mentioned Eckler. I looked like mid-season at some point where just, running backs, when they're lined up in the slot or out wide, who averages the most yards per out run in those situations. And Aaron Jones is right there in the top 3 ever since he entered the league. The problem is they just don't do it that much. They had that Monday night game against the Chiefs last year where, he had freaking 150 plus yards just being used as a receiver. So I was thinking that would be the one kind of way to make sense of not having, adding any real additions to this wide receiver room in the offseason would be to use more Aaron Jones like that. But again, I don't have a good feel for what the Packers are doing.
Get this guy on the sidelines in Wisconsin, ladies and gentlemen.
Why not? Hit me up.
Yeah, absolutely. Go there with LaFleur. So the final award I want to talk about is Mike Davis, and he won the Most Improved Player Award. We love this one. I'm curious, Ian, as to whether you think he ends up being more than a second fiddle, because I think, unfortunately for Mike Davis, he's shown really good efficiency, but he has always kind of played that second fiddle or needed an injury to get some production. So there's no doubt that he deserves a shot, but do you see any team handing him the backfield?
Probably not, but we got to give the man credit for this year. It's been fantastic, dude. Only Dalvin Cook and Derrick Henry, and David Montgomery had more broken tackles than Mike Davis, until week 17 came around. Probably adding that, and he's still right there. Only Nick Chubb had a higher rate of broken tackles. It wasn't like, he was just getting all these excess volume and only putting up yards because of that. I understand not a lot of people out there, and you probably shouldn't have. You probably didn't watch a ton of Panthers games this year with them being, as bad as they were for most of the year. But this offense was entertaining as hell, some of the things Joe Brady was doing. Being able to get 4 players in Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, and Mike Davis over 1,000 total yards. I mean, look, Teddy, I'm not giving up on him, but I think at this point, it's going to be hard to, imagine him as more than, like a sum of its parts type quarterback. Can he lead a great offense? Sure, but I don't think he's exactly going to elevate a good offense to a great offense. And everything around him was pretty damn good, man. Kind of gives you shades of the Chargers and what we were talking about with them. So Mike Davis, while I think he can get this role, look, it took him, I think this was team number 4 to even get in this position and then get an injury to Christian McCaffrey. So I hope he stays in Carolina and they give him a souped up, backup RB deal. I just don't really see someone taking a chance on him. It'd probably be cheaper to just draft a running back in the first, 4 or 5 rounds. That's going to give you, 90% of what Mike Davis can give you. And that's really the whole root of the problem with, this idea that running backs don't matter. I think people just kind of buy into that a little bit too much. They don't matter because there's this arbitrary salary cap that we're all deciding, adds what competition around the league. That's never been proven true, but we all hang our hat on that. Why shouldn't the best running back in the league get as much money as whatever freaking billionaire owner wants to pay the guy? I don't know why we need to do this, but we do. And because of that, when you give a team, X amount of dollars to spend, you are going to pay more attention to your quarterbacks, your pass rushers, your wide receivers, because there's a much bigger difference between the best player at those positions and someone on the lesser end of things compared to running back who's so much more dependent on their teammates around them. So, short answer, no, I don't see Mike Davis getting another opportunity elsewhere, but it sucks because the guy was a lot of fun to watch this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if he does go somewhere, he's probably an injury away from being a league winner. And personally, I kind of like to stack those guys at the back of my roster. So I probably will be diving into some Mike Davis. Ty's going to get me going hard in the paint on these best balls this year and upping my number of best balls that I jump into. And he's holding me accountable to that. So I imagine if Mike Davis goes somewhere and he is in a tandem, I will probably be after him in certain spots for sure. Ty, we have talked a little bit of Mike Davis recently on the free agent episode, but do you want to give a couple thoughts on the intergalactic Mike D?
Well, I think if he did go elsewhere, he has kind of a floor where he can operate however a team wants to use him. I know it didn't work out in Chicago with Nagy operating as the short down back or early down back or whatever. But, he's top 10 among running backs across the board when it comes to receiving. And Ian mentioned the forced missed tackles. And, what's amazing is he was one of the worst when it comes to yards before contact per attempt this year. But he just racked up the yards after contact. Over 70% of his rushing yards this year came after contact. And elusive rating, another phenomenal PFF tool among all running backs with 50 touches. Nick Chubb is the GOAT, but Mike Davis, PFF's 3rd most elusive running back this year. And I think he's the one guy in Dynasty that you could actually go out and buy right now for a relatively cheap price who could actually experience that big uptick in value. Obviously, it's an outlier scenario if he was to go somewhere, but somewhere like Pittsburgh kind of makes sense. He fits the bill, fits the Steelers mold. And it is all about this conversation, running back the market is as saturated as the fantasy football industry. But, if he wants to take a cheap deal, the Steelers are a team who can't afford anything but that. And it would be kind of a perfect marriage, I think, if James Conner was to walk.
I dig it. We got our buddy Jason Gray ties in the chat asking if Mike Davis could go back to the Seahawks. I think that could be an interesting spot for him if he was kind of punked into that Chris Carson role.
Run the ball.
Yeah, so did I. Not cooking anymore. They're freezing shit. Ty, you were going to steer the conversation in a different direction towards some more philosophical talk. Why don't you dive into that?
Well, yeah, let's just go a little bit to like off-season land here. And something that I think will be a huge conversation piece around dinner tables of fantasy football this offseason is the quarterback position. Folks like Ian, folks like Rich Rebar, your former colleague, JJ Zacharyson, they've all really paved the way for how we approach the quarterback position. So just a few quick footnotes for listeners. Like, number one, tiers are tightly bunched among the quarterback position. They all score a similar amount of fantasy points per game. Like, this is some of our conceptions that we go into each season with. Hit rates have shown there is a lot of turnover at the top of the position for fantasy as well, and that we can find quarterbacks in our drafts later on, and we chase a specific profile of quarterback, right, in fantasy. Those are, concepts that not only we live by for the last, decade or so, but they've also become fairly universally embraced, Ian. And then now this year, we saw just an explosion. 11 guys scored 300-plus fantasy points. Half a dozen guys scored 350 fantasy points, which is more than we've had in the past 5 years combined. So, Ian, if I didn't put you to sleep there, was this an outlier season, or is this kind of a changing of guard, so to speak, at quarterback?
You good, brother? I think this was maybe like the kind of season that made us all realize what's kind of been happening underneath our nose for a few years. And that's that the game is changing. And we all see it. Any of us that's been watching football for even, 20 years. It's just an entirely different product now than it was, in kind of those mid 2000s. And, I'm sure anyone that's seen the 80s or 90s knows this is like barely even the same game. But if you still got raw, QB fantasy points per game, 6 of the top 10 seasons ever in the history of the game have come in the last 3 seasons. So it's because of guys like Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, all these guys that have the dual threat ability that it used to be. We have Mike Vick, and that was pretty much it. Your Randall Cunningham, your Steve Young, we can pretty much count the true rushing threats on 1 or 2 hands from these decades of action. And now we have, honestly, the same amount of guys that were sweeping over those decades just in the league right now. So late round QB, it's something that it's going to be a big question going into next year and going to best ball and figuring out what we want to do. I would say in 1 QB leagues, we can still get away with, going late round approach. Usually there is someone flying on the radar. We saw it with, Lamar 2 years ago. Kyler, even kind of this year, I guess he kind of got pretty hot by the end of it. I think Rodgers was probably the one that was most undervalued this year. People were still kind of slow to come around to Josh Allen. I think there's still value, but in terms of just waiting until the last 2 rounds, particularly in a 2 QB or super flex league, I think those days are over. You need, if you're in a 2 QB league with how high scoring these guys are, I think you need to use one of your top 5-6 round picks on it, because once you get down to the bottom of the barrel, it gets rough. And it's not like other positions where if a running back gets hurt, you can handcuff them and get 90% of the value. If you had Dak Prescott last year and you lost him, you're just screwed, and you got to find someone that's going to be 80% as good. So yeah, I think getting one of those top quarterbacks, and again particularly having this dual threat cheat code nature of the position when we have these guys that can run, just heightens the floor, and it really paves the way for not busting. Even Lamar Jackson, I know he burnt people that were drafting him the 3rd round. Okay, he shouldn't have been going that high, but he had to still finish the year as a top 5 guy with that stretch run he had. These rushing yards are just unfair in fantasy football, but it's the game we play. Keep going back to well with these dual threat QBs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, a mix of both of what we're saying. It's totally that we want these profile of quarterbacks, and it seems like if you want one of those quarterbacks with the traits that we covet, you're going to have to go in that 5th to 9th round range at the latest next year. So where I want to go next is we've kind of littered this entire conversation tonight with a lot of coach talk, and the turnover in this league, it's like a moving company. Just guys come and go, and it's just insane. There are currently just a ton of GM vacancies, countless head coaching vacancies, like Chargers, Jags, Jets, Falcons, Texans, Lions, your Eagles, Trav, who will never have a GM vacancy, apparently.
2 in one show.
All these teams, though. So all these teams are set to roll out new offenses in 2021. So Ian, feel free to weigh in on any of those situations, but I was wondering, like, how heavily do you weigh these schemes and play callers when it comes to the weapons on those offenses for fantasy? Like, can a coach really drive a player's value, and is that kind of an under discussed topic in the fantasy community?
Yeah, I like this question. I pulled up an article I do before every season, just like, and how can play caller tendencies, help us find some fantasy football upside. So I was kind of looking back at what I was saying before the season started. And, sometimes we can overthink it. When there's a lot of player turnover, it's harder to, look at a coordinator and just say, oh, his wide receiver one from 2010 had X amount of targets, so this guy should have that. We just don't always know, because if you're a good coach, you make your scheme based on the talent of your players. You don't try to force players into your scheme. As we know, not every coach out there, really goes by that strategy. But generally, I think it's better used as a guide and sort of like a tiebreaker than something to completely hang your hat on. But a couple examples of, things that I think we were able to pretty clearly see. Jonathan Taylor just having the potential committee problems. I mean, he got so lucky just in terms of Marlon Mack getting hurt in week one. The fact that it continued to be as hard as it was for him to break out was, incredibly surprising after the Marlon Mack thing happened. But I was lower on Jonathan Taylor going into the year just because of what we've seen Frank Reich do. I mean, in 2015, he drafted a first-round running back from Wisconsin, Melvin Gordon, and proceeded to play Danny Woodhead over him for the entire year. And, same thing, with but you also look at a situation like Doug Peterson, who is another guy, him and Reich, worked together for plenty of years, where he hadn't had a committee. But you look at him with Miles Sanders. I'm sorry, he had only had committees. But you looked at last year at Miles Sanders, and the dude had freaking the four highest single game snap rates from Doug Peterson. So, it's always like, hey, this has been a tendency, but when is that tendency going to break? So that's kind of the balance you got to find. But yeah, running back situations I think are great for it. And also sometimes, like Gary Kubiak and Dalvin Cook, I was pretty high on Adam Thielen, actually, because all the talk was about the running backs. And when you look at Gary Kubiak over the years, I mean, his wide receiver one was averaging, 130 plus targets, with a good 25-year sample size. So yeah, again, so something that I think is definitely good to pay attention to, but not necessarily overly freak out about. I mean, hey, I love everything the Cardinals are doing right now. Cliff Kingsbury spreading things out, running this breakneck pace. But hey, other than Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, and Kenyon Drake, haven't exactly gotten too many other consistent fantasy guys out of it. So, we try to know everything we can about these guys, but I think at the end of the day, again, balance it with everything else. And we're just trying to project workload at the end of the day, because anytime we try to outsmart these dudes with talent, hey, we might win one every now and again. I did call out Cordero Patterson being a running back no fewer than 5 years ago. But for every one of those, there's a lot of other stuff that gets us in trouble. So again, we're trying to project volume, and I think paying attention to pass coaching tendencies with the backfield distribution, maybe with the target share, with your number one or your slot receiver. Those things make sense. But again, it's just another piece of the puzzle.
Totally. And that's the perfect way to put it. Another piece of the puzzle. I like what you said about striking a balance too. It's kind of the name of the game of fantasy. Like, you want to buy into these certain narratives, but you want to strike that balance. Because obviously it will make a difference if Joe Brady or Eric Bieniemy is the guy instead of Robert Salas. That's going to make a difference, but you have to strike that balance. And I loved what you said about Kubiak there. That was a really great point. Like, you want to buy on the perception of the market at times as well, because those things jump the shark really quick. Last question, Ian, and again, just can't thank you enough for hopping on with us. But running backs, rookie running backs, a bunch of whom were or still are in the playoffs right now. Cam Akers, Gibson, Dobbins, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jonathan Taylor, James Robinson, DeAndre Swift. Actually, really quick, Ian, should I be saying James RB1 son, or should I be saying James RB1 son? How am I supposed to be saying that?
James RB1 season's also a third potential pronunciation. It's up there, man. It's up for debate.
I think you gotta put a little Tupac in it and be like, RB1 son, like something like that.
Yeah.
I think to me, that's how you really put the oomph in it. But yeah, that's just me. Fire away,
for the listeners, that's called the definition of going straight to the horse's mouth. There, you ask the person who, that's how it's done, guys. So. Finally, on the running back position, do you think it's getting a bit deeper for fantasy? And do you think the majority of these rookie running backs that we see here will end up being kind of the bulk of our running back twos in rankings for 2021?
It's looking that way because I'm going to look at the top 7 like rookie running backs just in terms of carries from last year, and you can talk yourself into pretty much any of these guys as legit top 15, dare I say, options at the position. Dobbins is someone I'm a little bit softer on just because I don't think this 2-back committee is going anywhere. Gus Edwards should be back. Lamar's taken away. They don't throw their running backs. Maybe Dobbins, is just insanely efficient with his carries because he is a fantastic running back, but it's just going to be a tough, situation. The volume is going against him there. But you look at these other guys, DeAndre Swift with the Lions, he's their pass catcher. If Adrian Peterson gets out of the way, he's their 3-down workhorse. James Robinson already has that role. Jonathan Taylor blew us away with what he could do as a receiver this year. He didn't have his first drop, I think, until week 17. Was going wild with that. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, disappointed, but hey, if we can still get the lead back for the Chiefs offense, I don't think it's going to be, finishing as low as it did this year too much moving forward. Antonio Gibson, God forbid J.D. McKissick chills out a little bit. We're looking at, DC CMC over there. Cam Akers finally is getting the Todd Gurley role. Like, he honestly has a very good case as a number 1 guy. If we just project what the Rams have been doing over the past 6 weeks into 2021, Cam Akers would have the largest workload out of anyone. So again, like, we can really talk ourselves into all these guys. On my podcast several times, I presented this question, like, who do you think out of this class will ultimately be the RB1 in 2021 ADP? Jonathan Taylor kind of seems to be the consensus answer. I would just say really keep an eye on what the Jaguars do, because James Robinson, he was 3rd in touches this year before getting injured, behind only Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook. Like, the workload was there. It's been there. He's a very good running back. Like, okay, I'm not saying he's necessarily even a top 10 guy that if we could just pick whatever running back we wanted to win one game. I'm not saying he'd be in that, but certainly a above average talent at the position. We got Trevor Lawrence coming there, potentially an upgraded coaching staff. If they don't add any running back of consequence in the draft or free agency, James Robinson is probably going to be the value of the group. But again, there's just all these guys have a good chance. So yeah, I think the bulk of these dudes are going to be top 15-ish backs. I don't know if it's necessarily a changing of the guard. I think, we have seen teams more willing to go with younger running backs in recent history, not just, in the last couple years. But I think just, getting more into nitty gritty with these each of these backs' respective situations, that's where you see the depth chart really opening up and having a ton of upside, because basically all these guys, none of them have like a pass catching deficiency other than A.J. Dillon, who we haven't talked about. Even Jonathan Taylor, who again mentioned maybe had some drops problems at the end of the year, but if Rivers is back and keeps throwing those guys, and Wilkins and Mack are just completely out of the picture, he's going to be going for 300 plus touches. So yeah, man, all these dudes are going to be signing up there. We got about 6 or 7 months to try to figure out where to rank them.
Totally. And I think it might end up being that age-old debate that I probably could have mentioned when we were talking about the quarterbacks, but what you do with these tiers that are so tightly bunched is you end up just trying to draft at the back of them. And Robinson's that perfect guy who might be somebody I want to like better than a lot of those players, and we actually end up getting a little bit cheaper than some of those guys because of the name value. Actually, I have one more question for you, Ian. Will we know what a catch is in 2021?
Age-old question. I like Mike Lombardi's rule. Is he advising now? I used to always listen to GM Street when he was with the Ringer, but he always says, you
need to.
You gotta go to a crowded bar. You just ask the bar. If you have a group of guys sitting at the bar, is it a catch or not? Like on the first roll, like it shouldn't be this freaking hard. I understand we have high def replay. We can see every last blade of grass, but man, it's frustrating out there, man. Maybe just maybe 2021 will be our year though. Maybe.
That's funny. I think the replay could be to the detriment of us knowing what a catch is, obviously, right? Because it gets so over-analyzed with these guys going to the ground. Obviously, all these Cowboys fans are still talking about Dez for fuck's sake.
He was reaching for the goal line. Like, it's not even up for debate. He caught it. They changed the rules and said that he caught it. Yeah. Now, here's the problem. Aaron Rodgers would have come back down the next drive and scored anyway. So
yeah,
that specific example doesn't exactly matter, but Dez absolutely caught it.
Yeah, I even as an Eagles fan, as much as I don't want to, I agree with that too, because it crosses the plane and it's over. It should be over. It's done. Yeah, like it's a touchdown. So yeah, that was a great question, Ty, because I don't think anyone knows yet.
We're over it.
Okay, Ian. So huh? yeah, I'm definitely over it. Yeah. Just this season was really hard for me as an Eagles fan, Ty. I just would appreciate a little bit of space to allow for that. So Ian, Ty said last question twice. I actually have one more little one for you. We know you work on a ton of stuff for PFF. You are 100% workhorse over there. You got the podcast, all the articles. Your Twitter game is A1. What's on the horizon for Ian Hartitz in 2021?
Yeah, I already got a lot planned. I'm pretty much got the content up through March or so, I would say. Big thing on the horizon, still getting the details down, but trying to do immediately after the Super Bowl, 32 days of team needs and kind of team offseason preview. One day, one episode with a beat writer that I'll try to get scheduled here moving forward. So excited to do that because one of the biggest, I think, edges I've found, over the years, just getting ready for the next year is just taking the time in February, not to freak out about, just all these rookies and stuff. We have 3 months between the draft. We have time to get to those guys, particularly after draft. We have 3 months to look at the rookies now actually in the context of their team. So I think while everyone's spending so much time on the draft, just take a couple weeks, go through every team, see what they're losing at every position, and see where they could be improving. Because I remember this time last year in February looking at the AFC and pretty much pinpointing the Steelers and the Bills as two teams that just seemed overly complete at pretty much every single position. So, I don't know if either of them are, obviously Steelers have already lost. We'll see if the Bills even make it past this weekend, but it's a good way to kind of get you comfortable, get your feet wet with the season. So I'm hoping to try to bring that to all the listeners of the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast, and there'll be tons of, articles and goodness along the way. So next time you're on the pod, dudes, was good to talk, and I'm sure we'll come across our way again. If you two dudes are staying with the ball all year round like you should be if you're trying to climb up here, I'm always down to come talk.
Beautiful. I was going to say we would love to have you back on again. I also hope to see you back in the Kings Classic in 2021, Ian. I got
to defend that crown, man. You know how it is.
Yeah, well, I took the auction league this year too. I took the auction one.
Bro,
so,
real quick, so that auction, man, that was my first ever auction draft.
Me too.
Okay, well, I don't know how hard you started drinking at the beginning of it, but I did not take that seriously enough. I remember getting in a bidding war for Ezekiel Elliott, and we were going like 63, 64, 65, 66. And I was like, fuck it. And I just went like 81 or something like bonkers. Yeah. And of course they didn't touch it then. And then Pat Carrain from Established the Run does awesome work. But this dude was like the biggest Ronald Jones truther all offseason. So the second Rojo went up there. I was like, I don't care if Pat bids $50. I'm bidding 51 to get this guy. So like I remember leaving that team and I'd gotten some guys and I was like, okay, like not a great start, but I have to go. I'll let the, computer thing sim the rest of my picks, hopefully just fill out my roster with some low-level guys. I had like 5 quarterbacks at the end of that.
Yeah.
Thing, so auction, not my year. Congrats on you getting the auction title. We'll see if you can get both next year.
Yeah, let's do it, man. Yeah, that was fun. Auction, like you said, it was my first time too. It was a ton of fun, like just the format and like the anticipation when you see the bids keep popping up. I definitely want to get into some more auction drafts this coming season. And yeah, I was pumped about that Ezekiel Elliott bidding work because I ended up snagging Alvin Kamara for like 61 bones after, and I rode Alvin Kamara's ass to that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you for breaking the bank. So, again, Ian, we cannot thank you enough for coming and chopping it up with us. We had a blast. We would definitely love to have you back on again. And anyone who's listening to the pod right now needs to go check out Ian's work. You can follow him on Twitter at iHartitz. And if you're on the PFF site, his name is plastered everywhere, dropping new content. And of course, the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast should be a staple in your rotation. So, Ty, you got any parting words for Ian and the listeners?
No, and that's all I was going to say is who is the best follow in all of the industry, who's the best data hub, and why is it Ian Hartitz and PFF respectively. That's all I wanted to say.
Appreciate you guys. It was a lot of fun.
I apologize for my connection. We had like serious windstorms here last night, so if I was a little leggy, I really, really apologize.
Yeah, shit was wild. There was like huge branches walking my kid to school this morning, and like it was pretty bananas. So thanks again to all of our listeners. We will be back next week. We do have another great guest lined up. Don't forget to subscribe to the TNFF network on YouTube for all the crew's video content, and all the written work is at TrueNorthFFB.com. Thanks again, Ian. We'll catch everybody next week. Peace.
Welcome to the True North Fantasy Football Podcast.